Hello, good morning, everybody, and welcome back for our second day of the Ideas Summit. So great to see everyone. Great day yesterday, and we've got some fantastic programming today as well. And we're going to start with it's really my pleasure to introduce the person who is probably most responsible for us coming to Detroit for this event, which having it in just such great venues here, and that is Jonathan Smith, who is with the governor's office, but a longtime friend also of the New Deal, and now Chief Deputy Director for the Michigan Department of Labor and Economic Opportunity. Jonathan has spent 2 decades working in politics, public policy, and the law. Prior to joining the state, he served in senior roles on Capitol Hill, including for great friends of New Deal like Congressman Derek Kilmer. Off the Hill, he's been in a senior role in the private sector, working to advance regulatory and policy frameworks for emerging technologies such as autonomous vehicles, aerial ride sharing. He's worked on a broad range of issues and helped pass dozens of bills that were signed into law, including at the federal level, like the Dodd-Frank reform bill. So has just had a fantastic career, particularly related to the discussion that we're about to have about how to grow an innovative economy. So Jonathan, thank you for all you've done to support our visit, and looking forward to it.
Well, good morning, everybody. Thanks for being here early. Hope everybody had a good time last night. Enjoyed the dinner at the new lab building over by Michigan Central. I'm really excited for this panel. Been looking forward to it. This is a really interesting time to be thinking about economic development. We're in the middle of, I think, a lot of transformation in our economy and in our country. We're dealing with, still really grappling with some of the kind of post-COVID impact on our communities. So, remote work, and when are people coming back to downtowns, and what are cities going to look like, and where are people going to live? We're really, we've seen this huge federal investments into things like addressing climate change and resupplying supply chains and reshoring supply chains. We've got kind of record low unemployment, but then also low workforce participation, and then really still grappling with a lot of inequality in our economy in general. And so all of these things are coming together, a really interesting time, and really changing the way I think economic development happens. I work for the Department of Labor and Economic Opportunity, created by Governor Whitmer in 2019, combining economic development, workforce, and community investment into a single department. And so I think when we'll bring our guests up, and they will probably talk a little bit about this, but you cannot just create jobs anymore. You have to create, if you're going to create jobs, you need to have trained, skilled, educated workforce that can fill those jobs. You need to have vibrant, thriving communities with housing and infrastructure to support them. And so really interesting time to be doing economic development. And we have some amazing guests that I will now invite up to talk more about this. And I'm going to get out my notes so that I don't get this wrong. So starting out, we have Mayor Cavalier Johnson from Milwaukee. Mayor Johnson took office in 2021. He's been working on violence reduction, economic development, roadway safety. I'm really excited that the mayor, in a previous role, worked with his city's workforce development board. So I'm sure he'll have a lot to say about the importance of workforce, and probably a lot to say about how cities are reimagining themselves post-COVID. So excited to have Mayor Johnson with us. John Fernandez, Senior Vice President for Strategic Partnerships and Innovation at the Mill. John has had an amazing career in economic development. The Mill is in Bloomington. It's Bloomington's home for innovators. He works closely with Indiana University, building a startup community. He's the former mayor, and he also spent some time working in the Obama administration as the head of the Economic Development Agency. So really great perspective both locally and on everything that's happening federally. And then also joining us will be Karen Freeman Wilson, President and CEO. President and CEO of the Chicago Urban League, but also former mayor, former New Deal leader from Gary, Indiana, and had an amazing career in the legal field as well, working on as the Attorney General. And so I think will bring great perspective both from her role as a local leader, but and all the work that she's doing outside of government now to support governments that are tackling some of these big issues. So I'm going to start with a couple of questions here. I apologize, my notes are. So, we heard a lot yesterday from a great panel talking about some of the federal investments that are being made in climate change and addressing climate change. Through the leadership of the Biden-Harris administration, we've seen a flurry of legislation. We've seen infrastructure law passed. We've seen the CHIPS and Science Act, the Inflation Reduction Act, and Mayor Johnson, I'll start with you. How is your community thinking about these opportunities, and what are you doing to position your community to take advantage of them?
Well, first of all, good morning to you. Good morning, fellow panelists and all new dealers out there. So I am really, really appreciative of the relationship that I have, that my administration has, that the city of Milwaukee has with President Joe Biden's administration. And the flurry of legislation that's been passed has been beneficial to communities like Milwaukee. In the city of Milwaukee, just as an instance, with the bipartisan infrastructure law, we're in a position where we've got literally tens of thousands of lead service lines in the ground, and it's a priority of the Biden-Harris administration to remove those lead pipes from communities across the country. In the United States, there's roughly, I believe, like 6 million or so lead service laterals in the ground, and the Midwest is sort of like a microcosm of that. Like half of those are in the Midwestern United States. Wisconsin is sort of a microcosm of that, and Milwaukee is a microcosm of that. There's like 160,000 lead service laterals in Wisconsin. Half of those are in my jurisdiction alone, in the city of Milwaukee. And with our current clip of replacing lead service lines, getting them out of the ground, it would take us roughly 65, 70 years in order to accomplish that task. But working collaboratively with the Biden-Harris administration, we're on a path right now where we're accelerating the roughly 1,000 that we take out of the ground each year by 500. And so that's going to take our timeline down significantly from the 65 to 70 years. So whether it's working with the President's administration on bipartisan infrastructure law implementation, whether it's the opportunities that will come from the CHIPS and Science Act, which I'm really, really excited about. I think there's no limit to the amount of work that we can get done in local communities. And what I've asked the Biden-Harris administration over time is that when you have resources, send them directly to cities. Don't get don't get them locked up in states, especially in states like Wisconsin with Republican legislatures. Send those resources directly to cities, directly to mayors, so that we can get things done on the ground across America.
That's great, John. Thinking maybe specifically about CHIPS and Science and some of the opportunities from your experience at EDA, and then also your experience kind of working with innovative tech startups now. How is Indiana, how is Bloomington thinking about trying to take advantage of this and leverage these resources?
Well, first, let me say good morning and thank you to the New Deal for having me. It's great to be up here with fellow mayors. No offense to our state officials, but mayors are a special group, and I really enjoy hanging out with them. I think what's happening right now is super important because it's really a manifestation of years, and frankly, even included a couple of Republican administrations where we were pushing this notion of real regional economic development. Not just a county working with the city, but thinking large and big about our regions so that we can be more competitive. It started, even in the Bush administration, they were pushing some of this. In the Obama administration, we took it to the next level with some very large regional jobs challenges where we integrated funding from multiple federal agencies so that our local partners would have a single point of entry to tackle these holistic strategies. And then now with the Biden-Harris administration, it's just an extraordinary opportunity to do some serious work. And for me, I look at it from the perspective of a couple perspectives. One is that our country has this incredible opportunity to leverage innovation, massive research and development in the private sector, our universities, our federal assets, to really change the world and to create this opportunity for inclusive innovation from an economic perspective. But we also operate in a country where the benefits of that innovation are highly concentrated. The last study I saw, there was like between 2012 and 2017, there were 5 metropolitan areas that accounted for 90% of all of the innovation sector job creation. That's a problem. And it's also a missed opportunity because I don't have to tell this audience, but I'll reiterate something that many of you have heard me say before. One of the things I loved about running the Economic Development Administration is I spent most of my time traveling around the country to all these unexpected places that were hotbeds of innovation and job creation. And I was constantly blown away. I'd go to places and I'd just, oh my God, I can't believe they're doing all this cool stuff. I never thought that this would be happening in, not to pick on one place, but Red River Valley. I was having dinner last night with a colleague from there, and I was just blown away by the activity that was going there. So there's an opportunity here to leverage these new assets, this transformational amount of money, to really broaden out who participates and benefits from this innovation economy. But it takes real work. And as it relates to these specific programs with CHIPS, you also have a number of the NSF kind of engine programs. These are big, challenging competitions, and there's strength in numbers. And I would just encourage people to really break down old barriers around geography and jurisdictions and bring together large groups that can actually provide the scale to benefit from this kind of investment.
Thanks, John. And Karen, I know your organization is thinking about some of the opportunities related to addressing climate change through the Inflation Reduction Act and some of the new technologies we'll be bringing in to sort of decarbonize our economy. Any thoughts about how these kind of federal investments are going to be a driver of economic development for your community?
Absolutely. First and foremost, let me say good morning and what an honor it is to be back with the New Deal leaders, but also to join this panel with these great panelists. I also want to observe that there'll be a Hoosier meeting in the corner for current and former Hoosiers because the quotient is pretty high in this room. When you think about the post recovery opportunities, I think that everything that my panelists have said, it's very important. I think that also we have a tremendous opportunity to make sure that the post recovery economy, with all of the innovation, includes everyone. Because the prior COVID economy did not. Whether you are in the Midwest or East or West or South, uh, there has always been a divide. In places like Chicago is much larger than others. And so we've been very intentional about thinking about how do we incorporate everyone. Now, the great thing about the Chicago Urban League, and I would even argue the great thing about the Urban League movement, because there's an Urban League in Milwaukee, and there's an Urban League in Indianapolis, and there's an Urban League in some city near all of you, is that we bring all of the elements that are available together. Whether you're talking about city government, because I know that many of us work with city government, whether you're talking about state or federal government, our entire movement works with every level of government, but we also work well with the private sector. And in doing that, we started to think about the whole opportunity, all of the opportunities that have been brought to bear around climate change. And so, about 4 years ago, we partnered with ComEd to create a solar installation program, which allows people to participate in the green economy, but also allows them to not only participate in installation, but in sales, in EV installation. And that has been very successful. And it has now been transformed from just ComEd to the state of Illinois, where they are funding that opportunity. And we are teaching other nonprofits, community based organizations to participate. The other thing that I would just lift up is that we are working with a group of community based organizations that focus on workforce to really um, combine our efforts so that we can partner better with the state, so that we can partner better with local leaders, so that we can partner better with corporations to make sure that we're not duplicating efforts, to make sure that we're leveraging our opportunities to get those people who have been marginalized and left out of the economy, not just into jobs, but into family sustaining careers.
Well, I'm going to go right back to you with a follow up on that one. I'm not surprised that we're hearing about workforce already. So you talked about pathway jobs and jobs that lead to sustaining wages. One of the trends that we've seen over the last few decades is this huge shift in our economy where we've gone from an economy where folks used to be able, with just a high school degree, to be able to access careers that provided kind of middle class wages. We've seen wages for those with just a high school degree or less decline, while we continue to see wages for those with a degree or credential increase. And so, as you're thinking about creating more economic opportunity, how are you thinking about making sure that economic opportunity is available for everyone? And what's the sort of workforce strategy associated with that?
That's a great question because, at once upon a time, particularly organizations like the Urban League and others that promote scholarships, and we do, focused solely on college readiness. And that's important. It's still important for those who believe that they would like to go to college. We think that college is important. I went to college. I'm sure these two went to college. Most of you went to college. So I'm not downplaying college, but what I am saying is college, as a parent of a 2016 Howard grad, comes with a lot of debt. And if there is an opportunity to create a career or to engage in a career without debt, that's important for our communities. We've been able to do that by partnering with local community college, by partnering with trainers, by looking at other opportunities. So not only do we have solar installation and solar sales and EV installation, but we also have cybersecurity courses that only last 12 weeks. We have other pharmacy tech programs. We have AWS programs. There are just an entire array of programs that are available that come with a credential, because the credential is more important than necessarily a 2 year or a 4 year degree for people who want to get right into the workforce. And it doesn't rule out college in the future. You may have that credential to start your career and then continue it thanks to an employee assistance program for college or some other credentials. So I think that's important. And community based organizations are doing that all over the country.
John, we think about, particularly in the innovation economy, it's interesting because on the one hand, very famously, not everybody who's been very successful in that field has a college degree. There's some very famous college dropouts who've done well for themselves, become billionaires. But it is continuing to be a sector that isn't, where uh, diversity and inclusion is not always been a strong suit. And so, as you're thinking about building, kind of innovation ecosystem, how are you thinking about making sure, from a workforce perspective, that opportunity is really benefiting everybody in your community?
Yeah, it's a challenge. We lean into it pretty hard in a couple of ways. At the mill, we run a program called the Coded Academy, and we started it as a pilot just in the Bloomington area, where we were targeting folks who may have been previously incarcerated, were underemployed, had other kinds of entry to the workforce issues, and we really tried to bring some training, kind of skills based learning, so that they would have the credentials to enter into a career path, leveraging the growing tech sector that we have. We were pretty successful in that, and just this year we received a state workforce grant that spanned that program into our region. It's called the Upland region, and as Karen knows, it's rural, and it's a challenging place to get people engaged and see this future that they can actually participate in. So we do that quite a bit. We also have 4 different investment funds, early stage funds, and honestly, when the first fund was started, it wasn't a deliberate strategy that we were going to earmark a certain percentage of the investments to underrepresented founders. It just happened organically. And now we have a substantial percentage of our investments are in companies that are led by women, minorities, and other underrepresented people in the tech sector. So I think you have to be deliberate about it. Um, it's interesting. Back in the day, we used to call it lifelong learning. Uh, so all of us, we may have a college degree or we may have a associate's degree or some other kind of credential, but we're all going to have to constantly be learning about these new tools and technologies that are going to make us more effective in our jobs. I mean, I never thought I would be spending a lot of time trying to figure out how to use AI. I do, and it helps. And these technologies aren't going to replace us, but the people who can adapt are going to be in a much stronger position. So we want to take that kind of skills-based learning out as broadly as we can to ensure that people have an opportunity to participate going forward.
Well, Mayor, I know, like I'm sure all the mayors around the room, you're really focused on trying to get good employers to come into your city and provide economic opportunity for your constituents. And I'm sure that, like a lot of the employers that we hear from here in Michigan, one of the biggest things they're looking for is skilled and talented workforce. And so, how are you thinking about talent and educational attainment as an economic opportunity, not just as an economic opportunity for the individuals, but really as a recruitment tool for some of these employers?
Yeah, thank you for the question. I think it's important for us to do both. There's the saying that you can walk and chew bubblegum at the same time. That's exactly what we have to do. We have to work to make sure that not only we're attracting talent and college educated talent, but we're also providing economic opportunity for those that don't go to college. And, I'm the first person in my family to attend university and to graduate from university. University of Wisconsin, Madison, go Badgers. Go Badgers. I got some Wisconsin folks back there. So, um, but just because I went to college doesn't mean that that's the right path for everybody. We got a number of brothers and sisters that did not go to college, but still need an opportunity to support themselves and to support their family. And as a matter of fact, as I was walking here from our hotel, I noticed that there's a lot of buildings going up downtown in Detroit here. And we got the same thing that's happening in Milwaukee. We're attracting a number of great employers. Pfizer, if anybody has a debit card or a credit card in your pocket, you've got Pfizer technology in your pocket right now. Their global headquarters was in a suburb of Milwaukee. They could have left. They could have gone to New York, New Jersey, where their CEO sits. They could have gone to Atlanta, where they've got a huge office presence. They could have gone to Omaha, where they've got a huge office presence. But my administration worked with them aggressively, and their global headquarters is downtown in the city of Milwaukee. Milwaukee tool manufacturer that's widely known, has been growing like gangbusters over years, is just expanding the numbers of jobs. They were growing jobs in our region. I said, it's important for those jobs to grow, yes, but they should be in the city of Milwaukee. And they went and they got basically a vacant building, an abandoned building. They're redoing that and they're adding 1,200 jobs in the city of Milwaukee. You see department stores that are closing their footprints in downtown locations. The Kohl's department stores, one of the chief brands in Wisconsin, is opening up a department store in downtown in the city of Milwaukee. I mean, the list goes on and on and on about the development that we're seeing in Milwaukee, and those will attract a college educated workforce, and that's great. I want to see that. But when folks are building buildings or filling potholes or doing the labor intensive work, you don't necessarily need a college degree. And so I think it's important for us to do both of those things, to say, hey, here's an opportunity for folks that choose to go to college like I did, but for other folks like my brothers and some other folks in the community, here's another opportunity for you to get a family supporting job, a middle class job that pays you well, that gives you a pension, that gives you a vacation, that gives you health care, all those things, and puts you in a position where you take care of yourselves and take care of your family. We should not, as Karen mentioned, we should not beat down this idea that college is the only opportunity. I think we've learned that lesson. We certainly have in Milwaukee and in Wisconsin, and that's why we're working with our workforce development agency. That's why we're working with the Greater Milwaukee Urban League in order to make sure that folks in our community know that there is another way, and we should, because somebody's got to build those buildings out there. Because I got a college degree, and it ain't gonna be me.
I just wanted to jump in because the mayor is absolutely right. But I also want to point out that the folks in this room are uniquely situated to sit down also with trade unions, because what we know is that they have not been the most open organizations. And we sit in an area, Michigan, Wisconsin, Illinois, especially Illinois, where unions are pretty much king. And so if we are going to see that type of of opportunity realized, we really need to ensure that everyone from the business agent all the way to the presidents of the building trade unions are on board with that. And sometimes they talk about it, but you got to ask them for the numbers.
Can I add on to that?
Please go ahead.
And thank you for mentioning that, Karen, because I think that's critically important too. And so what we've done in Milwaukee when I took office as mayor, we approached our unions, our trade unions, because there's huge opportunities for family supporting careers in the union construction trades. There really is. And you think about communities like Detroit, you think about communities like Milwaukee or Chicago or Gary, right, that relied on heavy manufacturing, and then those jobs went to right to work states down south, or they went overseas for cheap labor, and it left whole neighborhoods sort of in the lurch. And then when they didn't have economic opportunity, then poverty sets in, and then poverty sets in, and then violence ensues. So those manufacturing jobs may not be here to the degree that they were 50 years ago, but there still is a tremendous opportunity for folks to have family sustaining careers in the union construction trades. And so last year when I came into office, we worked with Milwaukee Public Schools, our public school district, and we brought together the union construction trades, and we gave some exposure to our young people. And that's one of the things that we don't do well enough, I think, is expose young people to the opportunities that are available to them. So we had hundreds of young people come through, get hands-on experience, get mentors in the union construction trades, and really open their eyes, even showing them a sort of a mock paycheck about what you could earn, because money talks, right? Money talks. Showing them what you could earn every 2 weeks when you show up to a job in a union construction or trade union opportunity. So it's so important for us to make sure that there is exposure for our young people in the union construction field.
Hey, Jonathan, can I just put an exclamation point on this? For some of you who are interested in the EDA Innovation Hub, challenge that's going on right now as part of the CHIPS and Science Act. Carefully look at the notice of federal opportunity, because it specifically says in it, as you're building these coalitions or these partnerships for regional strategies, it mentions unions. And I think a lot of people are going to gloss right over that. And I think if you gloss over that, you do so at your own peril, because I think that's part of a deliberate strategy of the administration in terms of how we want to grow this innovation economy. And it's an important point that's in that uh, federal funding opportunity.
Well, thanks for pointing that out. You could have just told me, not all these other folks, but um, I'm. It seems like there's a lot of interest in talking about workforce, so I'm gonna go with one more workforce related question here. We've talked a little bit about all the things we're doing to try to activate folks and get folks the skills and the credentials and the apprenticeships they need to get into these good careers. But we still have really low unemployment. And as you're thinking about creating jobs in your community, at least here in Michigan, one of the things that we're hearing is activating workforce, people who've fallen outside of the labor market, getting them back into the workforce. That's sort of where our talent needs to come from. It's many of the Midwestern states up here, we have been experiencing population decline. The federal government hasn't increased immigration from outside the country, and so if we're going to get the workforce we need, it's going to be activating folks who maybe are outside the labor markets right now. And so, can you talk about some of the strategies, tactics, wraparound supports, other things that you are doing in your communities to try to pull some folks back into the workforce to get them into these jobs that employers have open? Karen, do you want to start?
So we talk about low unemployment, and I used to say that's a lie, and it still is a lie. The reality is it's low unemployment for certain sectors of our communities. In other sectors of the community, whether they are rural, whether they are urban, suburban, it is high. In certain areas of Chicago, it can be as high as 40% because some people never entered the labor force and others long ago disengaged. And so we have to find those people. And you don't just find them by putting an ad on the internet or putting something in the newspaper, or you have to be innovative, you have to be intentional, you have to be very, very committed to finding those folks. First, it has to be important to you. I listened to the mayor talk. It's important to him. And I know that he will convey that to all of the folks who are either opening or reestablishing headquarters in Milwaukee. But it has to be important to all of us as leaders in the community. And then you have to remove barriers. One of the projects that we're involved in is called Equity Works. And it's involving a development that's being proposed in Chicago called One Central. And so, as we started to think about this development and not to look at it as a typical development, we started to think about the barriers. Maybe some of those barriers are educational. And so we added that to Equity Works in partnership with One Central. Maybe some of it has to do with childcare or transportation or some of those, what people typically refer to as soft skills, but it may be skills that folks just have not learned in life. Or maybe some of it has to do with reintegrating into society. All of those things have been incorporated in our Equity Works model to say to a developer, hey, we know that typically you will go to an organization like the Urban League or some other organization and community and say, we need you to help us find people for new jobs. We need you to help us find small businesses to be, joint contractors or small contractors on these jobs. But we said to them, no, we want full participation and we want you to sit with us to come up with those pathways. But it starts with barrier removal.
Mayor Johnson, how are you? Sorry, go ahead, John.
it's pretty hard to follow Karen on that because I think it's absolutely spot on. But I'm just sitting here looking around the crowd and thinking about my own kind of community, and it is all about talent and talent development. And I think the truth is that we are facing a serious challenge demographically in so many communities across the country, and it's not a unique problem to the United States. So this notion of if you have people who have ability, uh, it's foolish for us not to find ways to bring them to the game and get them involved and help them become part of this changing economy because we're not going to have enough people. I mean, boomers like me are retiring. There's going to be a massive challenge for many of our employers. So we have to find ways to build up talent, find it everywhere, make it part of our very intentional strategies in terms of how we advance our economy, and hopefully we'll come up with some reasonable policies around immigration as well, because it seems kind of silly for us to not be tapping into the global talent base as well.
So, Mayor Johnson, you talked about those pathways that do exist for folks who are not on a college track, and so as you think about you talked about a little bit about how you do some work to try to recruit folks into those, but how do you keep them in the workforce? What are the strategies that you're looking at to try to make sure that when you're finding folks who might have transportation challenges or childcare challenges or some of these things that are keeping them from showing up every day, what are some things that you're working on to try to make sure that workforce can take advantage of the opportunities that are there for them?
We're doing a number of things in Milwaukee. So when I came into office, officially elected in April of last year, I set a really ambitious goal to make the city of Milwaukee a stronger, safer, more prosperous community for everybody. One of the big goals that I put out there, though, was to grow the population of the city. You mentioned that in communities in the Midwest, we're seeing population decline. I said that I don't think that we should be nibbling around the edges and try to remain a city of roughly 600,000 people. We should be growing upwards of 1 million people in the city of Milwaukee, and we've got infrastructure to be able to support that. So in order to get there, though, we've got to work to make sure that folks have opportunity, that we remove some of the barriers that Karen so eloquently pointed out. And so in the city of Milwaukee, we're doing a number of things. We've got our workforce development agency that is training people all throughout the city, all throughout our county, in a number of different areas, making sure they're prepared for the workforce. We're the only large city in America right now, from my understanding, that's doing workforce development with kids as young as 10 years old in a program that we just created just last summer called Camp Rise, that I'm particularly proud of. In the city of Milwaukee, as it relates to transportation, our streetcar system downtown, which launched in 2018, you see a similar system running up and down Woodard Avenue here in Detroit, is free to use for folks through a partnership that we have with the private sector. Also, our county government is implementing a bus rapid transit system that's connecting the two largest clusters, job centers in the state of Wisconsin, downtown Milwaukee with our regional medical center in our western suburbs, right up and down Wisconsin Avenue. There'll be another bus rapid transit that'll launch in the coming years, going north and south in our county as well. So we're working to make sure that those things are available for folks. Talking about growing the city to 1 million people, that's going to require changes in zoning and having more density. And if you have more density, then people with their resources are able to spend dollars locally, which will create job opportunities for the people who live on either sides of those busy commercial areas, which will create more opportunity for folks in our community as well. So we're doing a lot of things to address talent. We're doing a lot of things to address growing our population. One of the key things that we did when cities, communities across the country received dollars from the Biden administration in terms of the American Rescue Plan Act, we use those dollars to maintain city services, right? This is kind of in the weeds, but we've got a 30-year sour, poisonous, terrible relationship with our state government that I was elected to fix, and we are fixing it, and we're this close to getting something done. We're really, really close to making that happen. And so we spent a lot of money to maintain city services, but two areas that we spent outside of city government services. One was working to make sure that we support early childhood educators and giving stipends out there to stabilize that workforce. And really, they are the workforce behind the workforce, right? And I think it's important for all of us to understand that. So we did that. And the other area was housing. So we invested millions and millions of dollars, the largest investment ever into housing in the city of Milwaukee. And so we're sort of hitting two birds with one stone. City-owned, tax foreclosed properties that are not on the tax rolls that become a burden to the city because we have to police them, we have to set out fires there, we have to cut the grass and shovel the snow, all those things. We're taking ARPA dollars, we're fixing those properties up, 150 of them with the resources that we have. And then from there, we're selling those properties at affordable rates to folks who will stabilize neighborhoods. So we're doing a lot of things in the city of Milwaukee to address the issue.
Yeah, well, I want to ask a follow-up question here, and we're talking about talent, talking about workforce, talking about economic development, and the thing that I think we've sort of landed on here is something that was really highlighted last night when we went to dinner at the Michigan Central investment, and that is the importance of placemaking. And Josh talked a little bit about this last night. Why did Ford commit nearly $1 billion to renovate an old building in Corktown? It was because they knew that the future of their company depended upon young college-educated talent. They knew those folks probably weren't going to want to commute to an office park in Dearborn. They wanted to live, work, and play in a cool, hip, urban environment that had transit, that had amenities, that had infrastructure to support them. And so, can you just talk a little? You started to talk a little bit about the investments in housing, and you talked about the city having a plan for growth. How important is that sense of place, and what are you doing in terms of investing in placemaking as a driver of economic development in Milwaukee?
Yeah, it is extremely important. Cities are not. This is the thing that just kind of just rubs me raw sometimes with some of my partners in other levels of government that probably don't understand necessarily the impacts of cities. Cities are not places that just are pass throughs to get you from one suburb to another. They're not a place for highways to just simply get you from point A to point B as quickly as possible. Cities are supposed to be experienced. You're supposed to walk in cities. You're supposed to experience cities. You're supposed to feel something when you're in a city. And so for us, that's why we're making the investments that we are in our streetcar system under the previous mayor that I'd like to extend from downtown and into the neighborhoods. That's why under my administration, by the time I leave this office, we have long tenured mayors in Milwaukee, so it may not be for a while. But before I leave, office, it's my desire to build out a bicycle network that reduces issues like reckless driving, but is placemaking. Right, it encourages people to come out from the inside, be active on the outside, and really utilize our pedestrian spaces. That's why we're working to create pedestrian plazas all across the city so that the city can tell its story. Right. Whether that's making memories, whether that's having new green space, whether that's protesting, whatever. We're creating those spaces in Milwaukee, and it reminds me of some of the work that the private sector in Milwaukee has done, taking what essentially was a dying mall. And I know because I got my first job there when it was at its peak and watched it slowly decline, and it's changed hands like 3 or 4 times over the course of the last decade. This most recent time, it's really transformed this mall right in the heart of downtown Milwaukee into this cool, hip place where there's a food hall and there's office spaces that make me envious because they're really neat places to work. Like there's games that folks will play, these golf simulators and wonderful event spaces and all that. And it's encouraging further investment in the center of our city. So it's extremely important for us to do those things. And talk about placemaking. The city of Milwaukee, under my administration, is creating, with my own plan, a pedestrian plaza on what was a 30-year surface parking lot, which I detest surface parking lots. They are not helping the cities to tell their story. They're not. So we are creating a pedestrian plaza that's right across the street from a $450 million expansion to our convention center that's right across the street from Milwaukee Tool's growing job base. That's right across the street from Pfizer Corporation's new development. That's right across the street from the coming Kohl's department store. That's right up the street from this food hall. That's right up the street from this reinvestment that we have in our Symphony Center. That's literally right across the street from this other multi-million-dollar investment that's going to bring a soccer stadium to Milwaukee, and probably about a half mile from a $500 million investment that Northwestern Mutual Life is making in downtown Milwaukee to expand their corporate headquarters. So placemaking is extremely, extremely important. We take it seriously in Milwaukee.
That's amazing, and I'm ready to go to Milwaukee. That sounds
really
fun.
Come on, billion people.
Karen, how is your community thinking about, I mean, Mayor talked about a lot of downtown investments, and then we see, a lot of placemaking. It has to focus in on that downtown. That's such an economic driver for our large urban areas. But then, we have so many people who end up living not in the downtown, but out in these neighborhoods and these communities. Is there any work that, your organization is thinking about or doing around placemaking that is around quality of life, more at the community level?
Absolutely. So Chicago is the city of 77 neighborhoods. And the Chicago Urban League is located in Bronzeville, but we also sit in the midst of Washington Park, Garfield Park, South Shore, Hyde Park, Kenwood. And in each of those neighborhoods, there is some type of housing that is being developed, and not just housing, but affordable housing. And affordable housing has many faces, right? When people typically think about affordable housing, some folks get nervous, right? Because that means to them, they automatically think about affordable as being low income. But, you have to be able to afford housing no matter how much or how little money you make. And so, affordable in this room can mean a variety of things. And so the Chicago Urban League supports that. And one of the areas that we are now getting involved with as a HUD certified counselor for first time home buyers are looking at opportunities for new college graduates. Talked about student loans earlier. Try getting a new mortgage with $100,000 worth of student debt, even if you are making $100,000 or more. That makes for a huge challenge without some innovative programs from the state, some innovative programs from the city, looking at how mortgage companies really determine your ability to repay, because typically they're paying for rent and things like that, and how you look at down payment assistance. And so as we think about involving young people in walkable communities, in new home ownership, and all of those opportunities, and in rehabbing property, because there are a lot of vacant and abandoned properties in the south and west sides of Chicago. The Urban League is front and center in those, not just conversations, but in programming to create those opportunities.
Jonathan, I just want to make a real quick point. And it may be weird coming from a guy named Fernandez, who is the mayor of a university city. But when we think about placemaking as part of a strategy, as this organization, as a New Deal, as we think about, politics of all of this, it's not just about our urban areas. It's not just about our large metropolitan cities or our semi-large cities. Placemaking needs to happen everywhere. And there are small communities all across the country that are important to our electoral strategy. And placemaking matters to them too. And so when we think about how we build partnerships, how we at a state level deploy resources to build that kind of bottom up strength of our economy, we got to think differently about how we're engaging in some of the smaller communities across the country, because there's tremendous opportunities there too. And those families want to be there just like we want to be in our cities that we're so proud of. And with a lot of the changes in technology and how we do remote working and all kinds of other innovation, there's opportunities to do some pretty serious placemaking in all parts of America, not just in our larger cities or centers like where I live and others. So I just want to make that point. I think it's important for us to think broadly about making.
I just wanted to add, you're absolutely right. Gary is one of those smaller cities. We had less than 80,000 people. And one of the things that we were able to take advantage of was really building up our lakefront. The other side of the lake from Chicago, from Milwaukee, same lake. But we were able to not only build up housing in that area, but also opportunities in the neighborhood for small shops, cafes, and other businesses, and to then attract one of the most recent national parks because of the Indiana Dunes. So you're absolutely right.
Fantastic. Well, I think we've got some time for audience questions. Does anybody have a question for the panel? Go ahead, Steve.
Thank you, mayors. I've been on the New Deal board for about 6 years until last year. When you look at the train wreck, or however you would call it, that is national politics, the fun part about coming here is hearing from you guys. And even though my parents, for example, are from Chicago and Detroit, one day I might go to Milwaukee. You made it a very exciting prospect to be there, maybe sooner than that. I'm really excited by what you guys are talking about. I have a small P political question for you, though. As it kind of impacts the Democratic Party. I heard two themes, one that my friend John raised, and one that I heard all you guys talk about, which is this idea that there's a lack of access to talent or good jobs or businesses in all sorts of rural and urban communities. And at the same time, we also need to be thinking broadly about how we welcome and bring more immigrants into the country. And I wonder how much tension you guys feel around those two issues in your city. In the Democratic Party, I think both of those are gospel. We need to be doing both. But it strikes me that there might be some zero-sumness in the politics between the idea that we ought to be bringing more people into the country where we have jobs that we need them to do. We also need to find jobs for folks that haven't been welcomed into the job market. And so I'm asking kind of as an open, controversial question to get your take on whether this is controversial, and maybe if that's a reason why we failed to make progress on both of those issues in the national conversation.
Well, I'll take a crack at it first. I mean, the truth is, Steve, in Indiana and in rural Indiana, it's not an issue. I mean, there are small counties in southern Indiana that have deliberate strategies building up, in this case, really building whole programs around attracting Latino workers, because they don't have workers. And we're bringing people in, and it's just not controversial at all. And it's kind of weird because one of these cities is Jasper, Indiana, which is home to a lot of woodworking, furniture, and it's the home of Senator Mike Braun, who's a pretty serious conservative member of the Senate. And in his own backyard, I mean, there's a natural strategy to bring new population in that doesn't look like historically the German Catholic American, Jasper, Indiana. So I think it's that may be an exception to the rule. I don't know, but I think that in the political stuff that happens in D.C. and in other state capitals, it's really disconnected from how most people feel about these things, because we don't really care on the ground level where we're trying to build community and help companies and bring people into what we're trying to do as leaders. It just gets caught up in all this noise of brutal partisan politics.
So I agree with that, but I also would be the first to acknowledge that what you are seeing is absolutely right. I've been to Jasper only once, but I know that there are places all over the country where people are benefiting from migrant workers and from people who are new to our communities. But at the same time, we've got two challenges. The first is that in places like Chicago, when we hear about bus loads or flights of people coming from outside of the country and being given a safe haven, while we are the city of big shoulders, there is also a sense that, especially in the Black community, that the needs of those in the Black community who have not seen opportunities have not been taken care of. And so you have a lawsuit like we've seen in the last week in the South Shore community that says, we don't want you to renovate a vacant school because we don't even have our needs met. And so tell us how you're going to do that. And you haven't consulted the community first. I think also it's important, and we just had a new mayor inaugurated, Mayor Johnson, and he talked about the fact that we can do both. We can walk and chew gum. We can make the opportunities available to new residents and former residents. But I think it's also important to address it up front. But that's where the federal government can really help. And we've got to solve the immigration problem. We've been talking about it for 12 years and nothing's happening.
Yeah, I think probably a lot of agreement around this room on that point. And I'll just say here in Michigan, we have a Office of Global Michigan started by a Republican governor, continued under a Democratic governor, that's focused on trying to bring new communities to the state. In part because that's what made the state grow in the 20th century was welcoming immigrants from all over the world, and in part because that we really need workers like they do in Jasper. So hopefully that real world need will translate to action at some point. I think we have time for one more question. Maybe we covered it. All right. Well, this was great. I learned a lot. Thanks to the panel. All right. Looking forward to the rest of the day. No, that was perfect. That was perfect. That's exactly what you want. You want the conversation.